Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar series. My name is Chloe Tetro. I am the coaching lead here with Ready Care. For today, we're going to be talking about VUCA, so VUCA, and self-care. Now, this is part of a series of talks that I'll be giving in conjunction with World Mental Health Day, which runs on the 10th of October this year. For this year, the theme is around prioritizing mental health supports during crises, during emergencies, humanitarian crises. So I'll be dipping in and out of some of the knock-on effects that can have to our everyday well-being. So beginning, I suppose, I wanted to give a little bit of a definition of what really is meant by crises, and that can be, if we look at war-torn countries, if we look at humanitarian emergencies. But a state of crisis can also be in, unusual places like 21st century society at large, workplaces, home places, and that brings me to the term VUCA. So VUCA is a term that is more and more popular, unfortunately, in leadership studies and in social commentary, and it was developed originally as a warfare acronym, which is why I'm saying it's a little bit sad that it's coming up a little bit more and more. So VUCA stands for V for volatile, U for uncertain, C for complex, A for ambiguous. Right, so as an acronym, they're used in warfare and they're more and more being utilized in day-to-day. Now, it's quite telling that, a series of descriptors usually used for battlefields have proliferated into our everyday parlance, how we speak in boardrooms, how we speak when we describe the world at large. And I want to make a quick note here on the types of language that we use. So the type of language that we use shapes how we feel and think about the world. So there's that saying that goes, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And even though I'm rooting this in managing a VUCA environment, my hope is to instill that the types of language that we use in our day-to-day is really, really important, and it can shift our level of awareness from I'm going to work to do my job to God, how are we going to get the quarterlies going? How do we crush this? How do we do this? We need to deploy the troops and blah, blah, blah. And it might sound a bit silly when I'm putting it that way, mostly because I don't have the exact language that's used in certain boardrooms, but the nexus of what I'm saying is essentially that we have a decision every single day to feed into that language or to choose to create something different. Now, far be it from me to say that we aren't in VUCA environments, that we aren't in extremely hostile and difficult, complex systems. But there's something I'll touch on in a while. How we choose to interact within that system and the power that we take within that system predicates how well we construct other systems. And what I mean by that is, if we're always just fighting to be better and on top in the system that we're in, when we're in a system that's essentially sick, we're always just fighting for a higher place in the hierarchy of sick, or the hierarchy of a sick system. So I'm not advocating for blocking your ears or sticking your head in the sand, unless that's your cup of tea. But what I am saying is being very, very aware that we can hold multiplicity. So something can be true an environment can be testing, an environment can be incredibly difficult. But one of the best ways to hold steady within all of that is the knowledge that not all things are fixed in the wording and the acronyms that we give them. Wording and acronyms here being for an analogy for whatever lens we view something through. And oftentimes we're in an incredible unsteady environment. It's in the advantage of the ones that want something from you and the ones that want to climb a hierarchy of unsteadiness to keep you in unsteadiness, So coming back to your center and not being wobbled, because when you're wobbled and you're looking for a fixed solution, we are hardwired to want predictability above all else. Our lack of predictability in our environment is what causes the most spikes in adrenaline, cortisol, or amygdala, which is our fear center, firing. Now, if we're in a place of continuous fear, we're very easy to manipulate. We're very easily led. We're very easily swayed because we want knowns above unknowns at any cost whatsoever. And sometimes, more often than not, at the cost of our own autonomy, our own internal locus of control. Now, one of the greatest things to fight back against that, to use VUCA language, or to regain ownership and self-mastery, where you're not being led somewhere that you don't want to go because of the system that you're inhabiting. It feels incredibly stressful. Of course it does. So your whole entire system is looking for that predictability. It doesn't have any. It's looking for, what can I control? And all you're getting are messages that you can't control anything. This is the biggest thing that will tell you. My phone here, I'm holding up for those listening, is the biggest thing that will tell you over and over that you have no control. There's pain and suffering and all these different things happening and you have zero control. And a human being's ability to feel like they are the leaders of their own lives is a huge predicator for the day-to-day experience of what we call nowadays in corporate parlance resilience. Now, resilience, by another term, can just be your ability to take what life throws at you and make something good out of it. Your ability to take what life throws at you and learn something out of it, grow out of it, instead of being battered and bruised and all of the other things that come along. So, I was watching Diary of a CEO 2 days ago, and this fella Chase Hughes was on. And he is a former CIA contractor. He is a world leader and behavioral expert. His biggest teller for somebody who has self-mastery and ownership is a human being's ability to show comfort, right? Which was quite surprising for me, but now that I think of it, it makes sense. So the ability to slow down in a stressful environment, the ability to come back into yourself, find your center, and not fall prey to whatever types of stressors are going around you. And that is incredibly difficult sometimes, particularly in an unpredictable environment. So some hard and fast ways to come back to yourself, right? Because essentially, something to remember is a huge difference in our experience of unpredictability now versus when we're 4 years old, right? Because essentially life is always unpredictable. But, you're 4 years old, you don't know what the teacher is going to say today, you don't know where people are going to sit, things are unpredictable. But the difference is unpredictability now feels threatening, whereas coming back to a place where unpredictability can feel safe and managed and like an opportunity to discover something that you didn't before. And that's not to say that you're in cloud cuckoo land and, you're not seeing these things. It's just knowing that you have a choice in how you show up in your day to day. And that choice will impact you. That choice will impact everybody else around you. And coming back into your body is one of the best ways. So I'll give you 3 different little practices before I go off on one. And just a reminder, this is a dialogue, by the way. So if you do have questions, please throw them my way or even comments. So coming back into the body will be the first thing. If you're operating from a very stimulated nervous system, you're very reactive, your brain's ability to make good decisions closes because you're hardwired for survival. The unfortunate thing about that is, first of all, your emotions everywhere, because it doesn't really matter how your emotions feel in survival mode. The other thing is, and there's the impacts that go along with that. The other thing is you will attach yourself to anything that feels predictable as a life raft in this sort of chaotic chasm. And that might not be the best thing for you or others around you. And sometimes there's a beautiful deception in handing you stability. Here you go, you've been feeling all these terrible things, and I'm going to give you this, and now all of these things are going to go away. And that, whatever that may be, might be out of line with something that you're okay with doing, or it doesn't quite sit right with you, or it could just be something like yelling at somebody that's annoying you, because that feels like stability. Regaining control feels like chewing the head off of somebody because you can feel that lack of control and you have to regain it at any cost. So to mitigate some of that and bring you back to center, I'll give you a very easy practice here. I'm going to write it down so that it comes up in the comments. It's not too complicated, but just so you have it. So this is called box breathing. I hate breathing exercises. I'll be the first to admit it. I hate them, but they work. And I'll tell you why they work. So where box breathing is concerned, what you want to do is inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, inhale for 4. Try do a few cycles of that. So that has been shown to immediately lower your cortisol. And your cortisol is your stress hormone. It's the thing that's probably chronically systemically high. And it shifts your nervous system back into what's called parasympathetic balance. Basically, the part of your nervous system that's in charge of resting and digesting. That's why sometimes when you feel stressed and your cortisol levels are high, you can have difficulty sleeping and you can have problems with your digestion, is because that part of you isn't online. So this box breathing basically helps with paced breathing to improve your emotional regulation, your blood pressure, and your heart rate variability. The other thing that you can add to that is grounding in the senses. Now, this is great, and for those of you that suffer from anxiety, this is particularly good. So grounding through the senses is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Generate here. Little visual aids. There we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is if you feel your anxiety is going up quite a bit. So name 5 things you see, 4 things you feel: my shirt, my chair, my hair, cold. 3 things you hear, 2 that you smell, 1 that you taste. So what that does, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is it redirects your attention from the spirals happening. What if all of that cocktail of different anxiety that's happening through the system, your adrenaline, your cortisol, which is destabilizing your entire system. What that does is it brings you back into the present moment, and it helps you to recenter quite quickly if I mean, this is used even when people have anxiety attacks. So it's really, really great. So remember the 4-4-4 is the breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And then this one here, your 5-4-3-2-1, is used in peak anxiety moments. So the other thing to bear in mind, and this will come into what I was talking about, I'll just make a little tag there, reframing. This will come into what I was talking about, where control, ambiguity, and unpredictability is concerned. So we've always had an unpredictable life, but right now the difference is unpredictability feels like a threat. Now, cognitive reframing, it's used quite a bit in CBT, and I have this way, that way relationship with CBT, because I once heard it described as self-gaslighting, and I couldn't unsee it then, but essentially what you're doing here is you're not lying to yourself. It's important not to lie to yourself. It's important to still listen to what you feel. So if you feel, I don't know, my job is going to be here next year. I know that there's a big rise in AI. I don't know if that's going to happen. You feel the anxiety. I would strongly, strongly, strongly suggest not to say the Irish phrase, sure, I'm sure it'll be grand, right? That is technically reframing, but it's not, right? It's anything that you resist will persist, and it'll bring friends along the way. So what I mean by that is, if you suppress an emotion, it's going to want your attention, and it's going to start looking for your attention in lots of other ways. And you could be in the shop buying some milk and go, oh my God almighty, tonight I'm so anxious. I have no idea why. I was just standing buying milk. I must be going crazy. No, well, maybe, but likely no. What's probably happening there is a lack of acceptance of how you're actually feeling, and reframing that is not helpful, and reframing that probably is taking the voice of somebody along your life that probably shut you down more than you liked, and all of a sudden we're talking like them. So what I mean by positive cognitive reframing is you acknowledge how you're feeling, but instead of being enclosed, you open it up, right? And I'll give you an example here. So instead of saying, I don't know what's going to happen with this job, you could say, I don't know what's going to happen with this job yet. Add the word yet, right? Which means lots of outcomes could happen, and some of them could be even better than they are now, right? So that doesn't really feel like a lie, because in the realms of possibility, that is a possibility. It's a very strong percentage possibility. So you haven't lied to yourself. You haven't said, sure, everything's going to be grand. If I just keep the head down, everything's going to be grand. If I just perform extra well at work, my anxiety will go away. Because that's not how humans work. So reframing's brilliant, but don't lie to yourself. I would never advocate to lie to yourself. And be kind to that part of you that's going, oh God, I need something to make this go away. And what's going to go away is the possibility of something better, the possibility of safety, rather than a total shutdown. Now, and on a similar note, so the other hugely studied way to calm the big existential is, firstly, I'll go back to it, understand that there's a narrative at play. And just because some things are difficult, challenging, horrific, inhuman, there are lots of other things in the world that are beautiful, incredibly human, kind, compassionate. And it's in the interest of media, particularly, to keep you watching. So more often than not, people do rubbernecking, right? That's the same kind of idea. We're drawn to horror. We're drawn to fear, and we're drawn to these things because, humanly speaking, they're a spectacle to us, right? And in a media market, without going total tinfoil here, those of you that watch will know that I'm pretty tinfoil. Strategically speaking, in a buyer's market, the economics fluctuate to do with a population's sense of fear and lack of control. That's not me just making it up. You can look that up. So it's very important to know that you're existing within multiplicities. And that's very hard for humans because we always just want a simple answer. But nothing's ever simple. You know this from arguments with loved ones where you're not involved because it's always easier. Where you say, they're both kind of right in a way. You know, both of their experiences have happened. I can see where the conflict is in the middle, but it doesn't detract from the fact that, yeah, you know, different things are happening at the same time here. So reframing your experience, acknowledging your experience, bringing a sense of safety back in the body. Then the other thing, the last little thing that I'd say to you there is connecting to your inner, I call it a compass, but if that's too soft a language, directive. That's more masculine language there. Your inner directive. So human beings are very relational, and when isolation magnifies our feelings of stress, connection reduces it. So there's an awful lot of research out there that's shown that rebuilding connections is hugely, hugely important. Finding somebody that you can speak to about your stressors that is good at listening, right? Some people are great at advice, but they're not great at listening. Listening's a good shout. Making sure you don't become isolated, and that could be isolated in a room full of people, right? If you are feeling really overwhelmed and panicked and scared about the future, there's a very natural thing of actually withdrawing within ourselves. So there's multiple meta-analyses out there that show that strong social ties give a 50% better well-being experiential outcomes in people. And that's in incredibly difficult times. So you think of stories that either you or someone in your family, someone you know, or even a story you've heard somewhere of people going through incredible difficult times. But they'll say, look, we had a very tough upbringing, but we always had love. So it never quite felt as bad. Or, you know, it was a horrific incident that happened, but I never felt alone in it. These are things we say quite often, or we hear quite often, more so than say, I hope. But they're real tellers of the depth of Gabor Mate, if you know the lad. Gabor Mate, if you know the very respected neuroscientist, psychiatric doctor who speaks a lot about trauma. He says, which I've noticed in my own life around with different individuals, someone can go through a trauma, a child can go through a trauma, someone who's totally powerless can go through a trauma. What scars them is less the trauma, but being alone with it. And if you have anything in your own life, everyone can find one of these instances. So even though it's difficult, reaching out and keeping that connection alive with other people and really finding your footing in what am I doing today? What am I trying to bring more of in the world? If I could rewrite the script for myself today, what would I want to bring into it? Being intentional about how our worlds are formed individually and collectively through how we show up, the way that we speak to one another, and what we choose to repeat. Because remember, the brain learns through repetition. There's been an awful lot of a very particular type of repetition over the last number of years that has shaped our worldview. Not everybody, but for quite a lot of people. And there's incredible power in that. So a power on the opposite, if you use the same tool, can be a power for the positive, just as good. Power for the negative and its opposite can be a power for good. So I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, do let me know. Get back in the body with your breathing, your senses, get them all activated. Be truthful to how you feel, reframe with possibility. And because we love predictability, actually, last thing I'd say on that is imagine a better future. And actually, I'm going to give that a little tag because it's worth tagging. Imagine something better. And that's not just a nice to have, that is shortcutting your brain's absolute love for certainty. If you give it a new target, if you give it something better to go towards, it's not going to feel as scary to go towards it anymore. Anyway, I've gone on now. Wouldn't be like me. Hope you found this helpful, and I will chat to you guys for a shorter one next week. Bye now.